Hey there, night dwellers. Welcome back to Nightmare Frequency. Before we descend into tonight's chilling tale, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and prepare yourself for another journey into the unknown.
I arrived in Hollow Creek just as the September sun dipped below ragged pines, casting long skeletal shadows over the narrow highway. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm a freelance writer who has built a small following by chronicling true scary stories that people swear are real. Logic and skepticism have carried me through countless investigations, but nothing could have prepared me for the oppressive dread that draped itself over this forgotten town like wet burlap. The air tasted of cold metal and wilted leaves, and every shuttered building seemed to watch me as I wound down my old sedan's windows. I told myself it was all atmosphere, but my heart hammered as I scanned the broken sign overhead. Welcome to Hollow Creek. Enter at your own risk. A crowd of crows cawed overhead, and I shivered. I checked into the Weatherby Lodge, a time-worn pile of timber said to be haunted by its first proprietor, who vanished without a trace a century ago. The lobby was lit by a single swinging bulb that flickered, exaggerating the lean of dusty armchairs and the thick spiderwebs clinging to corners. The proprietor, a gaunt man named Harold Thompson, met me with a hollow look and a half-smile that never touched his eyes. "You won't find many tourists," he said, voice a low rasp. I handed over my credit card and asked about the lodgings. He nodded toward a narrow corridor, whispering, "Number 7, but don't stay up late." When he closed the door behind me, the silence swallowed my footsteps. Room 7 was small, furnished with a sagging mattress, a cracked mirror, and a trunk full of moth-eaten blankets. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, patterned with children playing under oak trees, frozen in mid-laughter. I set out my recorder, notebook, and flashlight, tools of the trade, while outside the wind moaned through gnarled branches. I tried to steady my pulse. "It's just another story," I muttered, though each breath caught on the chill that settled in my chest. Before midnight, I heard the first knock. 3 light taps at the door made me freeze. I looked at the clock, 11:03 p.m., and eased off the covers. "Who's there?" I called, voice hushed. Silence. Then another 3 knocks, louder, insistent. I swallowed and rose, heart slamming, every instinct screaming to hide under the blankets. I cracked the door an inch. The hallway was empty, lamplight flickering at the far end. I stepped out barefoot, only to hear a soft giggle echo from the shadows. "Hello?" I whispered, inching forward. The giggle faded, leaving me staring at an open window through which the curtains flapped like pale ghosts. A child's laugh, distant and spectral, drifted on the wind before vanishing entirely. I jolted back into my room, slamming the door. My recorder sputtered to life unexpectedly, a burst of static followed by the faint sound of someone humming a lullaby. I pressed record, despite my fear, and held the machine at arm's length. The lullaby grew louder, as though an unseen figure had drawn close. Then a rasping whisper, "Emily, stay with us." My skin crawled. I darted to the switch, but the lamp refused to spark. In pitch black, I raced to the bathroom, flicking the light switch until the bulb blazed overhead. Morning came too quickly, weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows. I drank black coffee in the lobby and tried to shake the nightmare feeling. Mr. Thompson watched me over his newspaper, the headline reading, "2 children missing from Hollow Creek." My blood ran cold. "Any news on that?" I asked, voice trembling. He folded the paper carefully. "Be careful poking into old wounds," he warned. I drove to the diner, hoping for more details. Inside, locals exchanged furtive glances. A silver-haired woman named Maria sat alone, stirring her tea like she was pacing time itself. When I mentioned the missing children, her hands stilled. "They never left," she said softly. "They roam these roads looking for company." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears and something darker, desperate longing. Maria told me the legend. Siblings Lily and Mark, 6 and 8 years old, vanished the night their mother went mad and fled into the woods 15 years ago. She claimed towns heard their laughter echo at the forest edge, and some swear they've seen 2 pale figures in the mist. I scribbled notes, trying to argue logic, but her trembling voice and haunted gaze gnawed at my skepticism. With a storm brewing, I made my way to the abandoned Oakwood School on the edge of town. Dead vines strangled its brick walls and windows gaped like broken teeth. Rain began in soft drizzles, then hammered the pavement as I pushed open the rotting door. My flashlight revealed rows of empty desks and chalkboards scrawled with faded lessons. Everything smelled of mildew and loss. I followed scuff marks down the hallway. The bathroom door was ajar, and inside, the sink was covered in chalky handprints, tiny prints leading to the drain. Beyond, in the dark recesses of a classroom, I saw frantic chalk drawings of children holding hands, eyes gouged out with vengeance. My flashlight beam wavered. A child's low voice echoed, "Help us find the light." I spun around. No one there. My heart thundered as the voice repeated, closer now, "Find the light, find the light." The beam caught movement, two small silhouettes at the window, staring in, their faces pale and hollow, eyes black as charred wood. I stumbled backward, almost dropping my recorder. Fear propelled me into a sprint down the hall. Behind me, the children's laughter chased me, lilting and cruel. The front doors slammed shut on their own, and the wind whipped through shattered windows. I slammed my shoulder into the door until it gave way, and I tumbled into the rain, soaked and breathless. Back at the lodge, I hooked my recorder to my laptop, desperate for proof. The footage crackled with static, but between bursts I heard two voices giggling, whispering my name. When I amplified one section, I froze at the words, "Why did you leave us alone?" My breath hitched. I played it again, clear as day. Something clawed at the underside of my bed, nails scraping wood. I tore out of bed to confront whoever dared cross my threshold. No visitor, just the faintest imprint of little feet on the dusty floorboards. In the corner, a single child's sock lay, damp and shriveled. I picked it up, heart pounding, and the corners of the room plunged into darkness. The flashlight flickered, then died. From the shadows, Harold Thompson's voice called my name. "Emily, come see." I followed, trembling, down the corridor. Each step echoed like a drum of doom. He unlocked the door to the furnace room and motioned me inside. There, carved into the wall, were names, Lily and Mark, etched deep in splintered wood, surrounded by scratched symbols. "They never left," he whispered, eyes wild. I tried to bury the pain, but they hunger for company. Rainwater seeped through the ceiling, drenching the floor and my shoes. I tried to soothe him, but his tears were furious, bitter. "You're not safe," he said, gripping my arm. "They'll never let you go." A sudden crash shook the building. Power cut out, plunging us into absolute blackness. I felt something slip between us, a small hand brushing my calf. I screamed, wrenching free and dashing down the corridor, only to find it strewn with the silhouettes of children, dozens of them, standing motionless, faces turned toward me. They advanced silently, arms outstretched. My lungs burned as I fled, pounding down stairs I hadn't noticed before, flashlight forgotten. The pounding grew louder behind me, hollow knocks, urgent whispers. I lunged toward a rusted door marked basement. The stench hit me before I opened it. The furnace room gave way to a damp, windowless basement, low-ceilinged and lined with crates. Something exhaled behind me. I spun to see Mark's small face inches from mine, eyes shimmering with malice. He reached up, fingernails scraping my cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. I kicked him away and stumbled into a hidden alcove where an old diary sat atop a wooden crate. Flipping through, I read the entries of the mother who waited every night for her children's return, documenting their whispered visits and begging them to leave her in peace. The final entry was a scrawl. "They won't let me forget them. They want me to stay. I will stay with them." A chorus of childish voices filled the room, chanting her name. The air thickened, and the ceiling groaned. I yanked the diary free and sprinted up the stairs, bursting through the furnace door into the lobby. Harold lay collapsed on the floor, rocking and muttering in broken sentences about reunions. Lightning split the sky as I hauled him to his feet. He looked at me with glassy eyes, bleeding where I had been scratched. "Run," he gasped. "Run, or join them." The lobby doors blew open, and a wave of cold wind poured in, swirling dozens of tiny footprints in the dust. We tore outside into the storm, rain lashing our faces. I half-dragged Harold to my car, threw him inside, and slammed the door. The children's laughter chased us across the parking lot. I gunned the engine, tires screeching, and peeled away, headlights illuminating wraith-like shapes on the road shoulder. I didn't stop until the town lights vanished behind me. Harold's breathing grew faint, and when I glanced back, his eyes had closed. Whether he slipped into unconsciousness or something else claimed him, I couldn't tell. I drove through the night, rain blurring the world, clutching the diary to my chest. At dawn, I pulled into a rest stop and called for an ambulance. While I waited, I thumbed through the diary once more. The final pages were blank, except for one line scrawled in shaky ink. They live in every quiet corner, waiting for company. The words sank in like a warning. I gave the diary to the authorities and recounted everything. No logical explanation surfaced. The children were never found, and Hollow Creek was sealed off for a brief investigation before reopening like nothing had happened. But I know what I saw. I heard their voices. I felt their small, icy fingers. They're still there. Now I'm back in my apartment, the diary tucked away, convinced I've left the horror behind. Last night, I dreamt I heard a knock on my front door, 3 light taps at precisely 11:03 p.m. I woke to silence, but when I sat up, a single white sock lay on my floor. I don't know who left it. I don't want to know. But tonight, I'll check the closet before I sleep.
Story number 2.
I'm Marcus Lee, a freelance podcaster who specializes in true scary stories and obscure paranormal lore. My latest project, Echoes of the Forgotten, follows me and 3 friends into abandoned places with dark pasts. Elena Ruiz, our folklorist, had unearthed a whisper about Black Hollow, a logging town swallowed by winter in 1923. Its 20 inhabitants found frozen to death inside their cabins, eyes wide and mouths twisted in silent screams. No bodies were ever recovered. The town simply vanished from maps and memory. Locals talk of the Lurker, a shadowy figure stalking travelers along the old logging road, its eyes glowing under the moonless sky. We arrived at dusk, snow crunching underfoot, wind rattling our old Chevy's frame. "Elena, you sure this place exists?" Mark asked, fiddling with his audio recorder. He's our sound engineer, meticulous about hiss levels and background ambience. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the gain knobs. "Maps show a service road here, unpaved and overgrown," Elena replied, voice calm but her eyes distant. She holds a battered leather journal, filled with transcribed oral histories and county records. I cross-checked historical surveys. There was a land grant filed, timber rights sold, then nothing. It's a disappearing act worthy of Houdini. Rachel, our camerawoman, aimed her lens down the road. "It's too quiet," she said, breath fogging in the windshield. No animals, no wind through the pines, just this unnatural hush. She lowered the camera and glanced back at us. "Feels like we're being watched." I locked the doors and checked my own gear. 2 cameras, a digital voice recorder, infrared thermometer, and a handheld EMF meter that had been flickering since we crossed the county line. The display hovered around 3 milligauss, normal background, but every now and then it spiked, even though we were still inside the car. "That's our cue," I said, stepping onto the snow-packed road. The trees arched overhead, skeletal arms braided together, blotting out the last red slash of daylight. I clicked on my headlamp and offered the beam to Mark. "Light up the path. Let's get to the site of the old general store. Elena says that's where the last entry in the coroner's ledger was recorded." Mark's light cut through the twilight like a blade, illuminating rusted signs nailed to twisted trunks. "No trespassing. Private property." We ignored them. Our boots sank into 6 inches of fresh snow. Every step left twin prints, but behind us the road stretched empty, as if we were the first to tread it in a century. "Elena, show us that journal entry." Rachel's breath was shallow, visible in the lamp's glow. Elena opened to a page dated January 14th, 1923. I heard whispers in my sleep, calling from the woods. They promised warmth, safety. I followed them until the trees closed in. I can't see the moon, only black shapes loitering between trunks. Elena's finger hovered over the text. "That's the Harbinger entry." 2 days later, they were all gone. We paused at an intersection where the road split. One path led deeper into evergreens. The other trailed downhill toward a frozen creek. The EMF meter leapt to 12 milligauss, beeping furiously. "That way," Mark said without thinking, pointing to the creek path. Behind him, the trees seemed to bend about as if recoiling. We trudged down the slope until we found the remnants of a wooden bridge. It spanned a narrow gully, its planks warped and slick with ice. Frost traced every nail, every crack. I filmed close-ups, ancient graffiti, initials carved into the wood by long dead hands. Underneath were recent scratch marks, raw and fresh. Rachel's camera zoomed in. "There," she whispered. The letters Lurker were gouged into a plank, letters dripping with dark rust. We exchanged nervous glances. Hoax? I asked. Someone playing a prank on us? Elena shook her head. If someone came out here, they'd have to haul gear miles through the snow. And why carve that? The name wasn't used until decades later in one or two local horror stories. It's like the legend carved itself. A low hum vibrated through the air. The hair on my neck stood up. Mark's meter spiked to 25. Rachel's breath hitched. Then, silence. Absolute. Even the creak, frozen though it was, seemed to hold its breath. A single distant twig snapped. Snap, snap, snap. Someone or something was approaching. We froze. The sound circled us, starting far away, then inching closer, echoing off the gully walls. I flicked on my camera's infrared mode. The viewfinder glowed red. The forest stayed empty until an orb of white light blinked in the distance, hanging in midair among the pines. Elena, I hissed, "Is that your torch?" She shook her head. I didn't bring one. The light swayed, bobbing like a ghost lantern, drifting toward us. Our breaths came in razor-sharp plumes. Rachel lifted her camera, zooming in, her knuckles white on the grip. Then the light descended, settling at knee height 50 feet away. A silhouette stepped out from behind a tree. Tall, too tall, limbs unnaturally long. It held the orb in one skeletal hand. The flesh was gray and stretched tight over its bones. Its head cocked to the side, as though examining an insect. We backed away, heels crunching ice. The creature tilted its head further, and the orb winked off, plunging us into darkness. The EMF meter shrieked into the red. I slapped it into my pocket and clicked on my headlamp, shining the beam directly at the figure. It vanished. The forest swallowed it whole. "Run!" I screamed. We turned and bolted uphill, snow spraying behind us. My boots slipped. I nearly fell. Rachel's camera swung wildly, capturing our panicked flight. Branches whipped our faces. The wind tore at our parkas. Behind us in the cobalt night, we heard a soft, mocking laughter, a sound like choking on glass. We reached the car in what felt like minutes, but could have been hours. Mark's hands shook as he fumbled for his keys. The engine roared to life. I peeled out onto the road. Our headlights cut through the trees, illuminating a figure standing at the edge of the tree line. The same impossibly tall silhouette, its eyes reflecting our beams like dying embers. Behind the wheel, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. "To the cabin," I said, pointing. We had rented an old hunting cabin 20 miles north, thinking it would make a safe base. Even distance felt shallow now. The drive was a blur of white road and coil spring shrieks from our tires. None of us spoke. Every mile felt like a gauntlet. The forest hugged the highway. Occasional glimmers of winter moonlight danced across the metal guardrails. At the cabin, we shut every door and window, but the wind howled outside like a wounded animal. I checked my cameras, both still recording. Mark's audio recorder sat on the table, its levels wild. "We need to review this in the morning," he said, voice raw. Elena paced. "We can't stay here. Whatever that was could follow us." Rachel sat on a threadbare sofa, clutching her camera. "I got footage of it, but did you see its face? No eyes, just darkness where the sockets should be." Mark nodded, and it whispered my name. He swallowed. "On tape." He pressed play. Static roared, then, faint but clear, "Mark, come closer." His breath rattled through the mic, then another voice, "Elena's?" "No, higher, like a child's. Don't be afraid." The recorder's batteries drained and died mid-whisper. I grabbed the EMF meter and paced the center of the room. The reading hovered around 50 milligauss, then shot to 80. My headlamp flickered. "It's here," I muttered. "Inside." Silence. Then from the hallway came a slow, deliberate knock. Knock, knock, knock. Knock 3 times, then pause, then 3 more. Exactly like a Morse code. I counted. 6 knocks, pause, 6 knocks. "Open up!" A voice crooned, low, sibilant, neither male nor female. I froze. "Don't," I began. "Elena," the voice said. "We know you're there. Let us in." Elena pressed her back against the wall. "It's calling you by name," she whispered. "It knows us." Rachel crept toward the window. "We should leave. Now." But every exit felt like a trap. Another series of knocks. Then the knob rattled. The doorknob wobbled as though something tried to turn it from the other side. Mark grabbed an old fireplace poker. "Stay back," he warned. The knob stopped. Silence filled the cabin like ice water. We stared at the door. Then, in a voice so close, I felt the breath on my neck, "We just want to talk." From behind us, the EMF meter exploded into the red, sparks crackling at its tips. The fireplace soot bubbled and spilled across the hearth, but no flame appeared. The mannequins we'd propped in the corners as decoration, two antique hunters in wax, wriggled, plastic joints creaking. Their mouths opened. One raised an arm toward us, tipped its gun. I slammed the door shut and pushed a chair against it. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. "What do you want?" I called out, voice steady but echoing with terror. A laugh, bone splitter, warping through the walls. "Company." Then the thud of footsteps landing upstairs. Elena screamed. We all sprinted for the back door, but the porch had collapsed, leaving a drop of 10 feet onto snow-packed earth. In the night's glare, I saw dozens of footprints leading to the cabin. Footprints too small to be adult, too perfect to be animal. They circled the cabin like a hunting pack. "Get in the car!" I yelled. We tumbled out, sliding into waist-deep snow. The creature from the woods crouched at the tree line, watching. It held the orb again, brighter this time, pulsing. Mark pointed. "The car's blocked." 3 figures stood behind our Chevy, the lurker and 2 smaller silhouettes like a family of twisted dolls. The orb's light cast grotesque shadows on the trees. Elena grabbed Rachel's hand. "We can't go back in there." Her voice cracked. I scanned the forest. Another path led away through thicker trees. "This way," I said, trembling but determined. "Follow me." We dashed into the pines. Snow slapped our faces, branches clawed at our jackets. The orb's glow bobbed behind us. Stalking. Every now and then I glanced back. The figures advanced steadily, never running, coasting across the snow as though gravity betrayed them. After what felt like miles, we stumbled onto an open clearing. The orb swooped overhead, illuminating a circular pit, a collapsed sinkhole that must have swallowed the town's cellars decades ago. Rusted barrels and planks littered the rim. The glow poured into the abyss. "We lure it down," I panted, dropping my recorder and camera. "Then climb out the other side." Elena hesitated. "Risk it? We'll fall in. I'd rather risk that than be hunted." The orb dipped into the hole. The lurker followed, its long limbs folding to slip through the narrow gap. Mark backed away, then kicked at a plank, sending fragments rattling in. The creatures hissed, echoing hollow laughter. "Now!" I shouted. We scrambled up the far side, tumbling onto solid ground, just as the orb exploded out of the sinkhole in a burst of light. The lurker's howl bounced off the trees. I glimpsed its face then, a void of nothingness, a maw that stretched too wide, as if the earth itself had taken form. We raced downhill toward the highway. In the distance, headlights cut through the woods. Another vehicle? No, the orb, raging like a beacon, snapping from tree to tree. We screamed for help, waving our arms, but it slipped between trunks and vanished. Dawn found us at the highway's edge, icicles glinting on barbed wire like mist rising from frozen fields. No cars came. We huddled together, teeth chattering, until a state trooper finally passed by on his morning patrol. His beam froze when he saw us. Pale, blood-spattered, panting, he radioed in. Within the hour, a search party combed the woods. They found our car, doors ajar, gear scattered. No footprints led away from the clearing except ours. There was no sign of the sinkhole, no trace of footprints around it. The EMF meter lay by the cabin, display smashed. We gave statements, but provided no coherent explanation. The locals insisted there was never a cabin there, never a sinkhole, just forest. And no record of Mark's family disappearing in his childhood, the story he'd mentioned in passing. Back in town, we tried piecing our recordings together. The audio files had massive gaps, entire minutes erased. The cameras? A few chilling frames, a tall silhouette in the cabin window, a blur descending the bridge, Elena's journal page with new words etched in margins in fresh smudged ink, "You belong to us." The day we recovered our equipment, we saw the name Black Hollow reappear on our digital maps, blinking like a glitch. A new entry in Elena's journal, scribbled in our friend's handwriting, "Come back." We swore never to speak of it again, not publicly. The podcaster's code of ethics demands proof and reason. I can't provide either. All I offer is this warning. Some places aren't abandoned. They wait. They hunger for company. And when you pry them open, you just might become the next entry in their story. Last night I heard scratching at my door, rhythmic, deliberate, knock, 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 knock. 3 sets. My phone glowed with a notification, an unread message. I won't check it. Instead, I'll bolt the door and hope the walls hold. But I know the truth now. The lurker never stays lost for long.
Story number 3.
I never should have answered that ad on the bulletin board. Photographer wanted. Document historic Halcyon Asylum. Pay negotiable. My name's Jordan Weiss, and I earn a living chasing fading beauty in abandoned places. I convinced myself it was just another urban exploration shoot, that Halcyon, closed since 1985, would be like dozens of sites I'd already done. But Halcyon's darkness ran deeper than moldy walls and shattered glass. The morning I arrived, the sky was an angry gray, as if the clouds themselves were warning me off. The iron gates of Halcyon yawned open, chains dragging across gravel like wounded beasts. Ivy strangled the brick facade, and broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets. I shouldn't have felt the quiet so keenly. There shouldn't have been birds or wind or anything alive out here. But the grounds were unnervingly still. Inside the lobby, a single desk stood under a broken skylight. I set up my 5D and strode in, boots echoing hollowly. A ration of breadcrumb crumbs clung to the edge of the desk, and the grand chandelier overhead hung at a crooked angle, its crystals shattered like teeth. I rifled through patient files strewn in a heap, names, ages, diagnoses, paranoia, schizophrenia, depression, each scrawled in neat clinical handwriting. Every file stopped abruptly on July 12th, 1985, the day the staff evacuated but never returned. Rumor said the patients were left behind. I shivered and called out, "Anybody here?" My words roiled through extinguished hallways. No answer, but the soft drip of water somewhere deeper in the building. I spent an hour photographing the lobby corners, then moved to the east wing, once the children's ward. Tiny boots lay rusted in a row near a door painted butter yellow, now chipped to bare metal. I lifted my camera to capture the infantile scrawl on the wall. "We play by the piano." I followed the message down the hall to room 14, where a grand upright piano stood, keys yellowed and cracked. I raised my camera and click flash. In that instant, a single key depressed on its own, a hollow, metallic A that echoed like a summons. My heart jerked. I snapped another photo. Click, and the note struck again. "Hello," I whispered, hand trembling. "Who's there?" Silence. Then from the hall behind me, a soft giggle, childlike, distant. I spun, pressing my back to the piano, peering into the murk. Nothing but a shattered hallway and a cluster of old bed frames leaning against the wall. I set my tripod and recorded a short clip of the piano, planning to overlay ambient sound later. The moment I pressed record, the keys began to play themselves. A lullaby so off-tune it felt like fingernails across slate. I held my breath as the melody wound through discordant chords, 2 notes too low, 1 too high, before screeching to a halt. My camera slipped from my fingers. I caught it, hands slick with sweat, and fled the ward, stumbling into the corridor. The laughter followed me, rapid now, echoing off walls, and I bolted toward the stairwell. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended into the basement. Fluorescent lights rattled overhead, some sputtering to life, others dead. The air tasted of bleach and rot. Pipes dripped in time with my racing pulse. Near the bottom, an old metal door stood ajar. Yellowing radiation signs read, "Level 2, use caution." I pushed it open fully and stepped into a long room lined with glass isolation cells. A single flickering light cast grotesque shadows. Inside one cell lay a rusted wheelchair, straps dangling. On the opposite wall, patient names were scratched in frantic scrawl. Esther Blake, Thomas Reed, Marisol Young, each crossed out. At the end of the room, a single occupied cell beckoned. Inside, a man in a tattered nurse's uniform sat slumped against the glass, head bowed. "Excuse me," I called, voice cracking. I'm here to photograph." He lifted his head slowly. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but what froze me was the name tag pinned to his chest. Nurse Huxley. I'd read about Dr. Huxley, the chief surgeon accused of experimental lobotomies on children. He was supposed to have been arrested, yet here he was, breathing, alive or undead. "Please," I stammered. "Can you—" He tilted his head, lips peeling back into a thin smile. In a cracked whisper, "They told me to stay." Then he jerked upright with unnatural speed, banging his palms against the glass. It trembled under his touch. I staggered back, tripped on a pipe, and fell sprawling. The basement lights blinked off. I clawed for my flashlight in the dark. Its beam flickered on to reveal the cell empty. The wheelchair overturned, straps swaying. The door was wide open. I heard footsteps echoing on concrete, slow and deliberate, coming closer. I rolled over, scrambled upright, heard a rasp behind me. "Jordan." Detached from my body, I lunged for the exit door. My knuckles scraped the metal latch as something cold brushed my neck. I screamed, yanked the door, and tumbled into the stairwell. Upstairs, I didn't stop. I raced past the wards, collected my camera bag, and burst into the courtyard. Gray sky above me, empty grass swaying. My car wasn't where I'd parked it. Instead, Nurse Huxley stood in front of the gate, arms outstretched, uniform smeared in dark stains. His head jerked toward me, eyes glowing in the failing light. I froze, breath ragged. He spoke, voice like gravel. "They need you." I shook my head. No, I need to go." He took a step forward. With each footfall, the gravel shifted as though he hovered just above the ground. My skin tightened as if the air itself resisted contact. Then, without warning, dozens of tiny fingers slipped from the walls around us, pale hands, little ones, grasping at the air, scratching at the bricks. The children of Halcyon, long gone, rising to reclaim their jail. Their voices layered, "Mommy, where are you? Play with us. Stay forever." The world constricted. My head pounded. I stumbled backward and hit the gate release button on my remote. Nothing. I banged on the wall-mounted button. No click. The lock stayed fast. The hands rose higher, dripping black ichor where they touched the brick. Nurse Huxley advanced, chanting a soft, guttural lullaby. I retreated toward the sanitizer station by the front door. My eyes fell on a fire axe in the wall bracket. I yanked it free, turned, but the courtyard was gone. Instead, I stood in the main hallway, lights blazing overhead, the doors locked tight. "Where did it go?" I whispered. A child's whisper answered, "We found you." Behind me, the slender corridor stretched impossibly long, doors lining each side, their numbers mismatched and fading. I backed away until I bumped into a door marked "Exit." Relief surged. I twisted the knob. It gave way, swinging open onto a blinding white room. I stepped inside. Pain erupted in my skull as the door slammed shut behind me. The walls were padded like a cell, corners rounded, no windows. The only light was the glow of a single TV monitor embedded in the wall. It showed a live feed of me, sitting on a steel bench, fire axe in hand, eyes wide with terror. I dropped the axe. My reflection in the screen shifted. Behind me stood a line of children, pale and gaunt, eyes black holes. Their lips moved, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Nurse Huxley appeared behind them, fingers long as talons, his lullaby rising into a chorus. I raced the length of the padded room, but the walls stretched. Doors appeared where none had been before, each labeled with a patient's name. Esther, Thomas, Marisol. Each door rattled as if someone pounded from the other side. The children's whispers overlapped into a scream. The monitor's reflection shook, and the TV cracked, showering sparks. My vision blurred. I clutched the axe again, adrenaline and fear merging into desperate strength. With a roar, I swung at the nearest panel. The screen shuddered and splintered. Light burst through the hole, revealing the lobby beyond, panic echoing. I hurled myself out, bleeding but alive. The doors to the lobby flew open, and I tumbled outside into twilight. The front drive lay empty. No gate, no Huxley, no children. Just cracked footpaths and the willow trees bowing over the entrance. My car gleamed under a shaft of light, its doors unlocked. I dove in, hands shaking so badly I fumbled the keys. The engine roared and I peeled away, headlights carving through the dusk. As I sped down the road, the asylum vanished behind me. Brick walls dissolving into fog, windows bleeding shadows. I didn't stop until I reached the city. My hands were raw where I'd held the axe. My camera bag lay forgotten on the passenger seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing but the highway stretching into night. When I returned to my apartment, I finally opened my memory card. The first images were of the lobby, empty and silent. My hand hovered over the piano frames in each shot. No key was ever depressed. In the basement, only the isolation cells with their crossed-out names. Not a single frame of Nurse Huxley or the children. The final clip showed the TV monitor, static that burst into a brief, grainy flash of my face pressed against it, eyes wild. Then, darkness. I deleted the files. I've tried to forget every step I took beyond that lobby door. But sometimes late at night I hear a single note drifting through my speakers, a warped lullaby. And if I open the window, I can almost see them, pale faces at the edge of the yard, staring in, whispering, "Jordan, come back."
Story number 4.
I never intended to spend the weekend alone in Ashwood Farm. Certainly not after I inherited it from a distant uncle I'd never met. But when my girlfriend, Mia, backed out at the last minute, citing work emergencies, I shrugged on my pack and drove down the gravel lane under a bruised October sky. My name's Daniel Reyes, and I'm a graphic designer who thought a little solitude in the countryside would cure my writer's block. Instead, it nearly cost me my mind. The farmhouse loomed in silhouette when I arrived, a squat two-story wood frame, its paint peeled like birch bark in places, windows dark and unwelcoming. The door creaked on ancient hinges as I stepped inside, and the air smelled of mildew and something sweeter, almost cloying. I flicked on a lamp and spent an hour poking through dusty bookshelves and rickety drawers. Under a pile of ledgers in my uncle's study, I found an old leather journal, its cover cracked and page edges curled. I tucked it into my bag, thinking a few sketches might clear my head. Night fell quickly. I made coffee on the stove and settled into a sagging armchair by the living room fireplace, journal in hand. My pen hovered over the blank page in my notebook. I flipped it open. October 7th, 1952. Tonight I heard the whispering in the walls again. Eliza says I'm losing my mind, but I heard them calling my name. The neat script betrayed a tremor, each line wobbling. I leaned forward. The next entry was smeared, then torn away entirely. That's when I heard the first knock. 2 dull thumps coming from the wall behind me. I set the journal down, heart spiking. "Hello?" I called. Silence. The knock came again, this time closer, as though someone tapped from the other side of the plasterboard. I pressed my ear to the wall. There it was. Breath, shallow and urgent. A whisper, so faint I almost didn't register it. "Daniel." I jumped back, nearly spilling hot coffee. My rational mind flooded, rodents, old pipes contracting in the cold. I rubbed my temples. I was tired, overworked. A few more quiet days here, and I'd be fine. I went to bed early, locking the door behind me, and set my phone alarm for 2 a.m., just so I'd know if I stirred. Sleep came in fitful waves. At precisely 2:17 a.m., I woke to the soft chime of its clock. My room was pitch black except for the pale glow slipping under the door. I lay still, listening. From the hallway came a low humming, almost musical. A lullaby? I bolted upright. The door cracked open a few inches, and a gray shape hovered there, slender legs floating, too limp to be alive. A woman's silhouette in an old-fashioned nightgown, hair whipping around her head like seaweed. The humming stopped. The shape pressed her palms to the door, then dropped them, fingers trailing like dripping ink. I scrambled out of bed. "Who are you?" My voice came out strangled. The figure tilted her head, and where her face should have been was only a smooth, featureless void. I dashed down the hall to the living room. The fireplace glowed faintly, embers cold. On the hearth lay a single porcelain doll, face cracked, one eye missing. Its dress was yellowed, hands outstretched. Behind it, the journal lay open on the floor, pages fluttering as though caught in a breeze, even though the windows were shut tight. A voice, soft and hollow, spoke from the shadows. "You found me." I spun. Mia stood there, drenched in moonlight, framed by the doorway. Relief and anger wove together in my chest. "Mia, you said you couldn't." She lifted a hand. "I came to surprise you." Her smile was all teeth, but her eyes were too dark, too vast, like bottomless pits. I strode forward to hug her, then halted. Her skin was icy. Beneath her jacket, I glimpsed bruises blooming in purple arcs. "What happened to you?" My voice trembled. She raised a shaking hand and pressed it against mine. I recoiled as if burned. On my palm bloomed a bruise, a perfect handprint I hadn't felt her leave. "I'm home," she whispered. I backed toward the door. "Stop. This isn't funny." The doorknob rattled but wouldn't turn. My phone slid from my pocket. The screen read, "No service." Mia's form blurred, then solidified into the woman from the hallway, her mouth opening impossibly wide in a silent scream. Ink-black tears traced her cheeks, hissing as they fell to the floor. The journal's pages flipped faster, stopping on an entry filled with angry scrawl. "They take her, I take you." Something slammed against the front door. Thump, thump, thump. Then a voice as sweet as honey. "Let me in, Daniel." I sank to the floor, hugging my knees. The doll on the hearth cracked in two, splitting with a sound like a bone. From the fragments, dozens of tiny hands crawled out, pale, fleshy, clawing toward the ceiling, before dissolving into motes of dust. The fireplace roared to life, flames shimmering blue. I heard my uncle's voice, garbled from some distant echo, "Protect her, or join her." My head ached. I grabbed the journal and flipped back. The first pages spoke of a child named Eliza, born at Ashwood Farm in 1905. Her mother died in childbirth. Her father, my great-grandfather, spoke of voices after the funeral, voices that promised he could bring his wife back. He dug a pit in the cellar and buried Eliza alive, convinced that her soul would surface again, only she never left. He disappeared soon after, and the farmhouse changed hands until my uncle. I trembled. The humming lullaby crept through the walls again, stitching itself to my bones. I had to get out. I stood and rushed to the hallway, but it stretched impossibly long, the wallpaper pattern repeating in maddening loops. Each door I tried opened onto empty rooms, endless closets, or brick walls. Behind me, the lullaby rose to a chorus. Eliza, Eliza. Then a whisper in my ear. Daniel, stay. The voice was Mia's my Mia, and I felt her breath cold on my neck. My legs trembled. I thought of the open road, of my car still parked out front. I snapped the journal shut, shoved it in my pocket, and willed my feet to move. One step, two, my heart pounding so hard I feared it would break my ribs. At the end of the hall, I saw a door I hadn't noticed before. Light spilled through its crack. I burst through into the foyer. The front door stood ajar, moonlight pooling on the floor. I lunged outside. The car was gone. In its place lay fresh tire tracks leading into the woods. A wind rose, carrying echoes of children's laughter and the distant shape of a woman in white standing just beyond the tree line. She raised her arms, beckoning. My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message, "You found me." The shadows pressed in. I realized then there was nowhere to run. Ashwood Farm owned every path, every threshold. It had claimed my uncle, and now it wanted me. I dropped to my knees on the cold gravel, chest heaving. The lullaby wound into my bones. From the edge of the trees, a choir of voices rose. Stay with us. Stay with us. I reached into my pocket and withdrew the journal. The final page lay open, blank except for one sentence scrawled in fresh ink. He never left. My vision blurred as I slipped forward, hands shaking. The voices swelled in my ears until laughter split the night. I pressed the journal to my chest, tears of ink leaking down the leather cover. I closed my eyes, waiting for the darkness to take me.
Story number 5.
The first time I saw her reflection in the window, I blamed exhaustion. I'd been house-sitting for my friend, Dr. Vivienne Clark, who'd asked me, her roommate and fellow gamer, to keep an eye on her remote Vermont cabin while she attended a conference in Boston. As a software engineer used to all-night coding sprints, solitude didn't faze me. What I didn't expect was the silence pressing in so thick it felt alive. I arrived just before dusk. The cabin stood at the end of a winding gravel drive, pines crowding close on both sides. Inside, it was impeccably clean, hardwood floors, white walls, and a bank of windows overlooking a frozen pond. Vivienne handed me a stack of house keys and her number. Just water the plants, feed Flo, she said, nodding toward a plump gray cat curled on the couch. And don't let her out. She's nervous around strangers. After she left, I unpacked my laptop and monitors, set up my gaming rig, and let Flo settle on my lap. At midnight, I paused a raid and decided to stretch. The kitchen window faced the pond. Moonlight coated the ice in silver. I sipped coffee and stared when a shape skated across the glass so briefly I thought it might be an animal, but the pond was solid frozen. I leaned closer and saw a woman's face pressed to the outside, pale and dripping wet, eyes fixed on me. I jerked back, heart pounding, only to catch Flo's low hiss as she leaped off my lap. I rushed to the window, and there was nothing but empty ice and wind-bent branches. My reflection stared back, unblinking and alone. I chalked it up to a trick of the light and crawled into bed, phone set as a makeshift nightlight. Sleep came in rumbling dreams of water rising. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Vivienne. Just landed. Forgot my laptop. Could you bring it to the lab tomorrow? I answered yes and rolled over until a soft thump from the kitchen jolted me upright. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the door. Flo slunk ahead, whiskers twitching. The kitchen lights were off, but in the glow of my beam, I saw the pantry door was open. I don't snack at 3 a.m. Opening it revealed empty shelves. And at the back, magazine-clipped newspaper articles taped to the wall. Stories about drownings in the pond, the disappearance of a neighbor's daughter 10 years ago, and 2 more tragedies fading deeper into the 1980s. At the bottom, a photograph of a little girl in a frilly dress, eyes scratched out with a knife. Flo yowled behind me. I spun to see her fur standing on end, back arched. Then the pantry door slammed shut. I backed out, locked myself in the living room, and texted Vivienne frantically, but no reply. My phone said no service. I tried the landline, it crackled, then went dead. Flo pawed at me, so I scooped her up and sat in the armchair. Dawn broke pale and gray, thin mist rising from the pond. I brewed coffee and scavenged for cereal. By 7 a.m., Vivienne called. Relief washed over me as I described the pantry, but she cut me off. Lucas, there's something I forgot to tell you. The cabin's on private property, ancient family land. My parents died here 5 years ago. The pond was never safe. Okay? Her voice trembled. If anything weird happens, call me. I'll be back tonight. That girl in the photo, who was she? I asked, pointing at the pantry door. She sighed. That was my aunt, 12 years old when she vanished on the ice. They found her coat near the shore. No body. My dad went crazy, kept building things in the basement. We sealed it off and locked it up. It's just an old root cellar. No one's been down there for decades. I swallowed. Locked how? Steel hatch under the floorboards in the kitchen. There's a key taped under the drawer. Leave it alone, Lucas. Please. I agreed, though curiosity throbbed. Flo rubbed against my leg, and I gave her a saucer of milk. For the rest of the day, I worked inside, streaming games online, creeping back a little every hour to check the pantry. No new articles, no photo. I laughed at myself. I was on a deadline. Vivienne needed her laptop before tomorrow's lectures. That night, heavy rain tapped the roof and the wind rattled the windows. Flo refused to eat and prowled at the patio door. I fell asleep on the couch, monitors still glowing. At 2:02 a.m., Flo's frantic meow woke me. I bolted upright. The front door stood open. I flew into the hallway, floors soaked with muddy footprints too small for an adult. Flo, I hissed, and she skidded back inside, tail puffed. I shut the door and bolted the lock, breathing hard. Then a soft voice behind me. Lucas. My blood froze. I spun toward the kitchen. The pantry door was cracked open again. The voice was closer, sibilant, like whispering through reeds. I flicked on the light. The pantry was empty, but on the floor lay a broken piece of wood, the handle of an old ice skimmer shovel. The metal blade, rusted, was lodged between floorboards. My heart hammered. I grabbed a screwdriver and pried at the boards. Beneath them was the hatch. My hands shook as I peered into the black pit 30 centimeters below. The hatch was latched. I hesitated. Vivienne's warning echoed. But the voice whispered again, Lucas, help me. I leaned forward, light from my phone probing the darkness, and saw two pale hands, tiny, pushing the hatch upward. The hatch burst open. A little girl tumbled out, soaking wet, eyes hollow. She darted forward, mouth moving in mute desperation. I stumbled back, almost dropping Flo, who spit and swiped at the girl's ankles. The child's dress was sodden with mud, her hair hung in shredded knots. Don't, I choked, backing toward the door. Go back. She shook her head, tears or water rolling down her cheeks. Then she lunged to the girl's side, a pale woman in a nightgown, face gaunt, eyes like dark wells. She blocked my path. You kept her here, the woman whispered. You trapped her. Her voice layered, one voice thin and cracked, another a child's. I staggered back, clutching Flo to my chest. The girl crawled toward me, arms outstretched, lips peeling back in a grin too wide for her face. Stay, she crooned. Play with me. Panic flared. I swung my flashlight at the woman's face. The beam cut through the darkness, but I caught only her silhouette before she vanished into thin air, as if she'd never stood there. The hatch dropped with a thud behind me, sealing itself. Flo yowled and bolted down the hall. I chased, calling her name, fumbling in the dark until I found her standing in the living room, staring at the windows. I edged closer. Behind her reflection in the glass was the little girl. And behind the girl, dozens of pale faces pressed against every window pane. Children in vintage coats and nightgowns, eyes blank, mouths open in silent screams. I slammed the coffee table knob against the glass, once, twice, shattering a small pane. The faces recoiled as the pane cracked. Then the children vanished, and the living room was empty. Flo darted into my arms and purred. I breathed hard, cold sweat soaking my shirt. The storm outside had stopped, but the pond was eerily still. I dialed Vivienne's number, voice shaking. Don't come back, I whispered. Stay away. She hesitated, then said, I'll call you in the morning. I hung up and sat in the darkness until dawn, hugging Flo, never daring to look at the windows again. Morning light revealed muddy footprints leading back to the pantry, small child-sized prints, and nothing else. Vivienne arrived before noon, her face pale but composed. Together we pried up the hatch. In the cellar lay her aunt's dress, folded neatly atop old stones, and the ice skimmer shovel rusted through its handle. No body but a single porcelain doll's head, eyes gouged out, lay beside the stones. She closed the hatch and bolted it from below. She'll rest now, Vivienne said softly, gathering the dress and doll's head. Thank you, Lucas. I nodded, voice tight. She started the car and loaded her things, leaving me alone once again. As she drove away, I watched the cabin shrink behind her, wondering if I'd ever hear from her again. That night, I couldn't sleep. In my apartment's window reflection, I thought I saw a little girl's face, pale and wet, her empty eyes fixed on me. I blinked, and she was gone. But when I closed my eyes, I could still hear her voice, singing from somewhere beneath the floorboards. Stay, play, stay forever.
Story number 6.
I never thought a broken pull-down shutter could feel like a threat, until the night the Museum of Natural Curiosities decided to trap me inside. My name is Alex Reed, and I'd taken the graveyard shift as a security guard to make ends meet while working on my graduate thesis in anthropology. I knew the job would be dull. Empty halls, motion sensors, the occasional stray rat. But nothing could have prepared me for the thing that woke me at 2:17 a.m. It began when the main lights blinked out, plunging the central hall into moonlit gloom. I yanked my flashlight from its holster and tapped the circuit breaker in the back office. Nothing. The monitors in the security booth flickered to static. I cursed under my breath, faulty wiring, no doubt, and radioed maintenance. My words hit dead air. The radio crackled once, then cut out entirely. I stepped into the hall, every echo magnified. Display cases loomed like silent judges, their specimens frozen in sinister poses. A taxidermied wolf snarling, a two-headed turtle curled into itself, glass eyes glinting. My light beam danced across dusty placards as I made my rounds. Orchid mantis, Philocrania paradoxa, Victorian morning cameo, circa 1880. My heart thumped loud enough to scare me. Did I leave the main entrance unlocked? I pictured the darkness beyond that massive oak door, an empty street, fog rolling off the river, not a soul for blocks. I clicked my radio again. Maintenance? Anybody copy? Static. The building's silence pressed in, heavy as velvet. Then I heard it, a soft click like a footstep on the marble floor behind me. I spun, flashlight raised, but saw nothing. The beam caught the reflection of my own wide eyes in the glass of an exhibit, a row of antique medical instruments, their blades dull but menacing. I exhaled hard, forcing my pulse to slow. I moved toward the west wing where the specimens of ancient Egyptian relics were housed. There, a single glass case stood open. My stomach dropped. The fragment of a sarcophagus mask, chipped and priceless, lay smashed on the floor. I knelt to inspect the shards and froze. Footprints in the dust, bare human prints leading deeper into the gallery. Fresh. Hello? I croaked, voice hollow. This isn't funny, maintenance. No answer. I followed the footprints, flashlight trembling, through the dim corridor lined with mummies and mock hieroglyphics. The air grew cold, brackish, as though someone had opened a door to a tomb. My breath fogged in front of me. Around me, the mannequins of pharaohs and priests seemed to shift in the gloom. I blinked, and one had moved. It faced me now, jaw slack, empty sockets staring. My heart leapt. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a broken shard of mask. When I looked again, the mannequin had returned to its original pose, back to me. I dashed down the hall toward the staff exit, but the door was locked. No surprise, it kept the public in, after all. I rattled the handle and pounded the door frame. The lights flickered overhead and went out again, plunging me into total darkness. My flashlight flickered, then died. I was alone with my ragged breathing. A whisper curled through the dark. You shouldn't have stayed. My name escaped me as I fumbled for spare batteries in my pocket. I heard steps, soft, deliberate, circling me. I pressed against the cool wall, heart hammering. The whisper came again, closer. Alex, you found me. The voice had an otherworldly edge, like wind brushing through a straw hut. I managed to click my flashlight back on, revealing the glass-walled office at the corridor's end. Inside, figures stood huddled, my coworkers, their backs turned. Relief and dread tumbled together. I called out, "Guys, is that you?" They didn't move. Inch by inch, I approached. My light swept across them, and I saw their faces. Hollowed eye sockets, flesh gray and sagging, lips peeled back into toothy grins. They didn't breathe, their heads tilted in perfect unison as one of them whispered, "You belong here now." I backed away, gagging. The office door was locked from the inside. Behind me, the corridor stretched endlessly, as if the walls themselves had shifted. My only choice was the dark path ahead. I took a trembling breath and ran. The ancient relics gallery brought me to a spiral staircase winding down into the museum's sub-basement, storage and old archives. My shoes slapped on stone steps as I descended, heart a jackhammer in my ears. At the bottom, the door to the boiler room stood ajar, its chains uncoiled on the floor. Beyond it, pale, flickering light. I pushed through and found the scene. The aged curator, Mr. Langley, stood under a hanging work lamp, long coat trailing in oil stains. He hummed a nursery rhyme, fingers dancing over an old phonograph. The record spun, crackling out a warped melody. Sleep, little one, the night is nigh. He lifted his head, revealing a face carved neatly down the middle by a scalpel's precision. The left side was his, careworn, lined, while the right was raw muscle, slick and red. He smiled, reaching for the crank. Panicked, I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut. The chains tightened, jarring the hinges. The phonograph sped up, tick, 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 spitting into high notes. The melody twisted, warping into a dissonant scream. I pounded the door with my fists. "Help! Somebody!" My voice shrieked. The lamp above me swayed, casting long blades of shadow. Mr. Langley's humming twisted into a laugh, low and cracked. Suddenly, the phonograph record shattered mid-tune. The chains on the door rattled free, clattering to the floor. I didn't wait to see why. I bolted up the staircase, lunged through the corridor, bursting into the main hall where moonlight cast ghostly patterns on the floor. The front doors loomed ahead, wide and unlocked as if welcoming me home. I sprinted across the marble, shoulders burning, strides swallowing distance. I hit the exit and barreled into the night air, lungs searing. The heavy oak doors slammed behind me without a sound. Outside, the street was empty, the museum's windows dark and silent. My radio crackled back to life in my pocket. Alex, please stay. Maintenance, or something wearing its face. I shook it off, sprinting to my car. As I slammed the door, the headlights illuminated the museum's facade, and in the topmost window, a pale face peered down at me, lips stretched into a silent grin. I floored the accelerator, tires smoking, and left the museum behind. On the highway, I finally dared to breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from the museum director. "You canceled check-in. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, fingers trembling. I didn't answer. I'm sitting in a motel 30 miles away now, lights off, drapes drawn. Outside, I can still hear the warp of that nursery lullaby on the wind, and I know the museum watches me still, waiting for me to come back and finish my rounds. I won't.
Story number 7.
I wasn't prepared for the roar of the Atlantic when I took the keeper's post at Greyhaven Point. My name's Allison Price, and I'd imagined solitude, gulls wheeling overhead, the occasional fishing boat passing in the distance. Instead, I found isolation made something else wake. The lighthouse stood atop jagged cliffs, its whitewashed walls chalked by salt spray. I arrived in late October when fog settles like damp wool and the nights are endless. My only company was the maintenance man, Boone, who dropped off supplies once a week and never stayed past sunset. On my first night, I climbed the narrow iron staircase to polish the Fresnel lens. The lamp beam swept the sea in a stately rhythm, and I felt small and safe behind its circle of light. I locked the door and descended to my quarters, a single room with a battered cot, a wood stove, and a small desk where I'd set my laptop and stacks of books on maritime history. At midnight, I drank tea by the stove. Outside, wind growled around the tower, rattling the window shutters. I slept fitfully, dreaming of someone tapping on the glass, calling my name. 2 nights later, I woke to the radio crackling. The handset lay dead on the desk. I hadn't touched it since Boone packed it away, yet through the static came a voice. "Keeper, help us." I sat bolt upright, heart stuttering. The crackle stopped. I grabbed the handset. Silence. The channel dialed back to white noise. In the morning, I asked Boone if the radio was still functional. He shrugged. "They checked it 2 weeks ago. Works fine if you know what channel to call." He wouldn't say more. I caught him staring at the cliffs as he loaded my crate of canned soup. "You'll hear things out here," he muttered, "but you'll learn to ignore them." That afternoon, thick fog rolled in, cloaking the cliff's edge. I wrapped my coat tight and climbed to the lantern room to test the foghorn. The horn roared, a low keening note that vibrated in my chest. Through the mist, I saw a light, a small skiff drifting toward the rocks, its engine cut. I hunkered behind the lens and peered down. The boat didn't dodge. It scraped the barnacled stones below. "Mayday!" I shouted into the radio. "Coast Guard! Mayday! Vessel!" But no reply. I scrambled for the emergency flares, my hands shaking so badly the matches snapped. I ignited one. The flare hissed and sparked, painting the fog blood red. The boat stopped, then seemed to sway as if someone sat on the gunwale scanning the sea. My throat gone dry, I aimed another flare. The beam caught a man's profile. Gaunt cheekbones, dark eyes reflecting the flare's glow, head cocked like a bird listening. I shuttered the lantern window and fled down the stairs to my quarters, heart hammering. I shouldn't have gone back out. The next morning, the skiff was nowhere to be found, just a fresh scrape in the cliff face, telling of its violent end. No wreckage, no bodies. I called the Coast Guard. They found no missing boat matching the description. The channel remained silent. That night, I heard the knocking again, this time on the door to the tower's base. 3 slow raps. I sipped tea until the clock chimed 1, then stepped outside. Fog choked the yard. The beam of my flashlight trembled in my grip. I followed the sound around the tower. Rap, 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 coming from beneath the storage shed. The shed's door was locked with a padlock. I pried it open, expecting the empty space Boone used for spare parts. Instead, I found a shallow grave dug into the clay soil, a single body-sized hollow. My hands froze on the broken lock. The earth looked freshly turned. A chill sank into my bones. I raced back to the house, slammed the door, and dialed Boone's number. No answer. I tried the radio, but only static greeted me. Something outside scraped against the wall, slow and deliberate. My breath caught as the dragging sound circled the room. Then it stopped. Silence. Morning light brought little comfort. The grave had vanished, replaced by a smooth sweep of grass. I thought I must be losing my mind. Yet that night, I woke to the sound of footsteps on the iron stairs, footfalls descending toward my door. No one should have been up there. I crept across the floor, heart hammering, and flung open the door. Empty hallway. The only light came from the lighthouse above, pulsing through the fog. I followed the steps up. At each landing, I paused, listening. At the lantern room door, it clicked open. I pushed it all the way around. Inside, the Fresnel lens had rotated off-axis. Beneath it lay footprints, small and bare, crossing the metal grating. My flashlight beam landed on something I hadn't expected. A child's shoe, caked in seaweed and barnacles, wedged between 2 beams. And next to it, scrawled in chalk on the lens housing, a single word, stay. I backed away, heart pounding, and slipped on the wet metal. I crashed onto the stairs, cutting my arm on a jagged step. The shoe vanished when I turned back as though swept up by the tide. I stumbled downstairs, gasping, and locked myself in my quarters, ringing Boone's number until my phone died. I didn't sleep. At midnight, my vision blurred. The walls of the room stretched, warping like a drawing in water. I saw a figure at the window, a young boy, dripping wet, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked at me with eyes as dark as oil, lip trembling. "Help me," he whispered, voice echoing like distant thunder. I bolted upright. The window was sealed shut, frost filling the pane. I pressed my palm to the glass. Outside, nothing but the swirling fog. I ran for the radio, flipping knobs until I landed on a crackle of static. And then a man's voice, deep and hollow, "Leave this place." The signal cut out. My own voice echoed back, "Coast Guard, Coast Guard." For the briefest moment, I thought I heard laughter, childlike and cruel. Then all went silent. At dawn, patrol boats swept the coastline below but found nothing. The skiff, the footprints, the chalk, it was gone. Boone arrived late, wrapped head to toe against the cold. He locked eyes with me. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said, voice quiet. "The boy," I nodded, throat tight. He sighed. "They say a boy slipped from a skiff 20 years ago, trying to retrieve a flare. He drowned before his father could save him. They never found his body." He reached into his coat and pulled out a single barnacled shoe, identical to the one I'd seen. My stomach lurched. "He comes back," Boone said, "searching every keeper for company. The beacon draws him home." He laid the shoe on the desk. "If he wants you to stay, you refuse, else you'll never leave." I pocketed the shoe. Boone left as the fog lifted, leaving me alone with the sea's endless roar. Tonight, I'll climb the tower and relight the lamp. I'll echo every warning on the radio. And if I hear the tapping on the door, 3 slow raps, I'll stay locked inside until dawn. Because if I answer, I'll become the boy's companion for the rest of my days, forever lost in Greyhaven's fog.
Story number 8.
I joined the volunteer crew of the Whitby River Rescue Team, thinking I'd learn seamanship and help stranded boaters. My name's Harper Mills, and for 3 summers I patrolled the river's winding bends, rescuing capsized kayakers and towing disabled fishing boats back to shore. Nothing prepared me for the call we got that late July night. The radio crackled at 11:47 p.m. All units, we've got a distress beacon on Channel 16, vessel overdue since 6 p.m. departing Grays Point Marina, coordinates coming up. Our skipper, Dan Brick Whalen, frowned at the blurred GPS blip. That's the old river mouth, he muttered. Shallows, half-sunk hulks. Nobody sails there after dark. Still, protocol was protocol. I climbed aboard our little rescue launch alongside Jake, our rookie medic, and Mia, our navigator. A hot moon glanced off the water as Brick gunned the engine, spray lancing across the bow. The beacon's signal glowed faint on Mia's console. "It's here," she said, voice tight, "but no AIS tag. Could be a private boat." She frowned downriver. "Fog's rolling in." By the time we crested the last bend, the moon was gone and the fog thick as wool. Brick killed the engine. All we heard was the river's hush, the creak of our hull against slime-slicked pilings. Mia switched on her night vision camera. On screen, the water glimmered silver. But then, 50 yards ahead, two dim lights bobbed near the embankment. "Boat," Jake said, squinting. "Or something else." Brick eased us closer. The lights turned out to be lanterns hanging from old wooden stakes driven into the bank, markers for crab pots long since abandoned. Between them sat a small skiff, listing badly, tangled in weeds. Its hull was slick with algae, paint flaking. The cabin light was off. "Hello?" Brick's voice boomed across the water. "River Rescue. You need help?" No answer. Jake jabbed me. "Check it out." I stepped forward onto the gunwale. The fog clung to my breath. I nudged the skiff's rail. It rocked sharply. A slow metallic creak echoed from within. Brick lowered the launch's boarding ladder. I descended, boots splashing in 2 inches of foul river water. As I reached for the cabin door, I noticed something scrawled on the deck in barnacle-faded paint. "Do not come." Gooseflesh prickled my neck, but inside could be someone injured. I forced the cabin door open. Paint peeled from the walls, and the single bench seat was torn. A tangle of ropes lay in a pool of rust-red water. I touched it with the tip of my flashlight, powdered gill blood, still moist. A whisper rattled through the cabin. "Help me." The voice was small and cracked, like a child's. I spun around. "Nobody there." "Harper," Brick called. "Everything okay?" I closed the door slowly. Blood. No one in sight. I climbed back onto the launch. Brick frowned. "Let's get closer look from here." He nudged us upriver to check the shoreline. We swept our lights along the bank over collapsed boathouses and mangled pilings to where a patch of reeds parted, revealing a narrow channel. The water there was oddly still, darker than the rest of the river. "Beacon signal spiking," Mia said. "Over there." Brick aimed. I peered into the choked inlet, 10 yards long, dead end, walls of mangroves pressing close, and something glimmered at the far end, faint white in the fog. "Let's go," he said. We powered in. The launch's bow bumped a submerged log. I nearly lost my balance. The white shape solidified into something half-submerged, like the carcass of a small boat turned wing down. A hollow hull with a single porthole stared like an eye. Brake lights? I waved my torch. A throat-tearing scream split the night. One guttural howl, closer than I expected, coming from all around. Brick killed the engine. We listened as the river fell silent again. "It's not natural," Jake said, voice shaking. Mia checked the GPS. "No asset tags, no entry on any schedule. This boat shouldn't exist." Brick unstrapped his flare gun. "Hold positions. I'll check if anyone's aboard." He climbed over the bow into the water, like chest-deep in oily black. I gripped the railing as the boat bobbed. He reached the submerged hull, hauled himself onto the keel, and hoisted open the porthole. Inside was a narrow berth cluttered with personal effects. Framed photographs half buried in mud, a child's stuffed rabbit, its head caved in. Water dripped from a crack in the roof onto a makeshift altar of driftwood, upon which lay an open Bible, pages browned, a crucifix hammered through several wet pages. Brick peered in. "It's empty. No one here." He climbed back. I helped him aboard. All around, the mangroves rustled in the fog. Then, from the shore, a child's laughter, sing-song, cruel. I spun my light toward the bank. Dozens of shapes stood just beyond our beam. Children, dressed in wet, tattered clothes, their bare feet sunk in mud. Their faces were pale as death, their eyes milky white, unseeing. Each held a lit lantern, their sway matching our launch's bob. Brick's eyes went wide. "We need to get out, now." He revved the engine, but the river beneath us had turned to thick black sludge. The blades churned uselessly. The children began to advance, stepping into the water, moving closer. Mia fired a flare. The bright arc of red light cast grotesque shadows on their faces. They tilted their heads in unison, mouths opening in silent O's. The river began to bubble at the hull's edge. Something large moved beneath the surface, long, jointed limbs dragging us toward the reeds. Jake screamed. Brick kicked at the engine housing. "We're grounded! Throw me the line, Harper!" I grabbed the tow rope still coiled on deck and hurled it toward the shore. The children shifted back, but the rope snatched into churning black. I wrapped it around my waist and dove into the water, swimming for the nearest mangrove root. The slurry resisted. It felt like thick tar. Beneath me, something brushed my leg. Slick, cold. My scream froze in my throat. I clawed at the mud until I reached solid root and scrambled out, dripping and gasping. The rope pulled taut. Brick braced himself, and we held on as the engine choked and coughed. Slowly, agonizingly, the boat lurched free, sliding toward deeper water. The children retreated to the reeds, their lanterns bobbing as they faded back into the mist. Brick gunned the engine. We tore out of the inlet, water flying. The river seemed to part before us. Behind, the fog swallowed the inlet whole. We didn't speak until the shore lights of our boathouse came into view. Under the floodlights, we finally saw it. The mangrove channel had vanished, replaced by a flat bank of mud and reeds, no sign of water ever having flowed there. The rescue launch docked, engines still warm. We stared at the spot. Then suddenly, from the tangled roots, floated a single lantern, flickering faintly. Brick reached out and snatched it up. The glass was cracked. Inside lay a small photograph taped to the frame, a family portrait. 2 smiling parents and 2 children, standing aboard that same little skiff, the identical lanterns glowing at their sides. On the back, scrawled in a child's hand, "Play with us." The lantern went out in Brick's hands. We never found any missing boat or family matching the photo. The inlet never reappeared on sonar, aerial surveys, or satellite imagery. And the next morning, the river ran clear as ever. Safe, placid, the old hulks hidden deep beneath. But at night, when the moonlight slants across the water, I still hear the soft tinkle of lantern glass and the faint echo of children laughing, and I swear I've seen a single pale face peering back at me from the reeds, next to 2 dim lights that bob like lanterns, just beyond reach.
Story number 9.
I'd heard the legend of Pine Hollow Asylum my entire life. How the patients vanished one night in 1978, leaving doors wide open and meals half-eaten, only to be found years later locked inside their cells, alive and butchers of their own limbs. Nobody knew how they got out. Nobody explained why they returned. I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, chasing a scholarship to document forgotten psychiatric facilities. My name's Clara Nguyen, and I told myself I was too rational to be spooked by ghost stories. I was wrong. I arrived in late November when the maples around the asylum burned red with death. The wrought iron gates groaned as I pushed through, tripod and camera bag slung over my shoulder. The main building rose 3 stories of smoky brick, windows boarded crudely with planks nailed from the inside. The winter wind rattled them like teeth chattering in the cold. Inside, the lobby smelled of mold and rust. I set my camera on a suitcase-turned pedestal and took a panorama shot. Crushed vinyl chairs, a scorched receptionist desk, plaster peeling from the walls. I clicked record on my voice recorder. Pine Hollow Asylum, operational 1912 to 1980. Over 2,000 patients treated for everything from neurasthenia to demonic possession. A rasping sigh echoed down the hallway. I froze. It sounded like someone exhaling through a mouthful of broken glass. I rationalized. Draft, settled dust. I advanced past the reception desk into a long corridor. My headlamp's beam swept over sealed doors labeled Hemlock Ward, Elmhurst Wing, and the Cage, where patients deemed hopelessly violent were locked alone for decades. The door to that ward was ajar. I couldn't resist. I stepped inside. The cage was smaller than I'd expected. 9 cells across a narrow hall, each with a tiny window at face height. The soles of my boots scuffed the concrete floor. I filmed each cell. In one lay a tangle of bedsheets, shredded and stained. In another, initials carved deep into the wall, Amy 74. A feeble voice echoed, "Amy." I spun, heart pulsing. No one. My recorder crackled. "Did you hear?" Static roared, then a whisper. "Clara." My breath hitched. The voice was my own name. I scanned the cells. Then I saw her. A pale figure pressed tight against the narrow window of the last cell, head hanging as though her neck couldn't hold it. Her hair clung to her face like wet rags. Her lab coat was blood-splattered. She whispered again, "They took him." Then she lunged at the glass, pressing her face against the pane until I smelled cold iron, like she'd just licked it. I stumbled back, camera swinging. "Hey!" I shouted. "Who are you?" The figure's eyes flared white, pupils dilated into black pits. She screamed with soundless lips, and I bolted from the room. I didn't stop until I reached the main lobby, heart hammering so hard I thought it might tear through my ribs. My recorder lay face down on the suitcase. I flipped it over. Dead batteries. I pounded on the wall-mounted phone. No dial tone. I raced to the stairwell, pried open the steel door, and slammed it behind me. 2 flights down, I ducked into maintenance tunnels, twisted veins of pipe and wiring under the asylum. My footsteps echoed as I ran blindly, slipping on puddles and debris. At the far end, I emerged into the kitchen. Pots lay in sinks full of stagnant water. Rat traps snapped dry. On a door-marked pantry hung a cast-iron cleaver, blade-edged with dark crust. I swallowed. I needed to leave. But in my shoulder bag, the battery charger for my recorder clicked on, lights blinking. I set it on the counter and plugged in the recorder. It flickered to life. I hit play. My voice apologized over and over. I'm sorry, I can't." Then another whisper, "They need you." And a second voice, lower, guttural, "Stay." It wasn't on the tape before. I spun to flee and nearly sprinted into a patient. He leaned in the doorway, tall, skin sallow, hospital gown torn ragged. His lips peeled back in a grin that revealed no tongue. He moved like water, sliding forward, shoulders rippling. I raised my flashlight. The beam caught his face, eyes sunken, pupils too small. Then he vanished into the next room. I didn't hesitate. I barreled through the kitchen door into the service corridor, ducked past the morgue entrance, and charged up the stairwell. My lungs burned as I burst through the reception lobby and ran to the front hall. But the double doors wouldn't budge. I yanked at them until my fingers bled. Beyond the glass, the world was still night. Trees swaying, the moon a cold witness. Then I heard the latch click from the outside. I collapsed against the door. A voice crackled on the intercom above me, hoarse, mechanical. "Clara." The boards over the windows snapped apart like splintered bones. Moonlight cut through in slashes. Frost drifted inside. I screamed. Then the asylum was quiet again. The boards dropped back into place with a hollow thud. The intercom cut out. I took a ragged breath and turned. The lobby was empty. Shelves of patient files splayed open, countless folders fluttering like wounded birds. I grabbed the nearest file. Amy Poole, age 59, admitted 1968, discharged 1971. Outcome, homicidal dementia. Next line, status, missing, presumed dead. I stuffed the file into my bag and ran up the main stairwell to the second floor, to the ward where Amy had been housed, determined to confront what I'd seen. The hallway stretched in darkness, each door closed. I found room 214, Amy Poole. The nameplate rattled. I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty except for a single rocking chair facing the window. I filmed it, heart pounding. Then, in the chair, the pale figure sat, head turned slowly in my direction. I raised my camera. The figure stood and stepped toward me. I backed out, stumbling into the hallway. The rocking chair faced the door, gently creaking in place. I fled down the stairs and bolted through the lobby. The front doors swung open before me, as if pulled by unseen hands. I didn't look back. I ran through the gate into the night, the moonlight on my face cold as truth. I didn't stop until I reached my car, chest heaving. As I sped away, I glanced at my recorder. The red record light pulsed softly. In the playback window, a new file had appeared, a shaky 16-second clip. I clicked play, and my own scream shook the speakers. Then a whisper, "Thank you for coming back."
Story number 10.
I never imagined a single call could rewrite everything I believed about life and death. My name's Sarah Lee, a night shift ER nurse in a mid-sized Midwestern hospital where the quiet hours are usually routine. Lacerations, broken wrists, the occasional drunk passed out in a stairwell. But on one rain-soaked Tuesday, the storm that slammed the Midwest seemed to tear apart the very walls between our world and something far older. It was 2:03 a.m. when the triage desk crackled with frantic radio traffic. Medic 12 to ER, code silent, one pediatric patient. We're at the secondary entrance now. The paramedic's voice trembled. In 10 years, I'd never heard code silent. That meant no vitals, no breathing, no pulse. I straight-armed off my post and sprinted down the hall, goggles fogging, stethoscope swinging. Medic 12's gurney lay under the drip of the loading bay's fluorescent light. A small boy, maybe 7, lay cocooned in a drenched blanket. His skin was chalk white, lips cracked like old parchment. No parent in sight. The paramedics said the child had appeared in the backseat of a bystander's car. No driver, no explanation, just a terrified witness who left us to figure it out. He'd been pulseless for minutes. I grabbed the paddles and called for epinephrine tray. My fingers shook as I pressed the gel pads to his chest. "Clear," I shouted. My voice dropped away as I pressed the button. The defibrillator spat sparks, no response. Twice more, and the monitor flatlined, an infinite black line against green. I leaned close, hearing nothing but my own ragged pulse. Then, softly, impossibly, something tapped my shoulder. I whirled around. The ambulance bay was empty, except for the humming extractor fan. "Sarah?" It was Dr. Patel, his face pale in the strobing light of the storm lamp. "What happened?" I swallowed. He's gone." I gestured at the boy. Patel glanced down and blinked rapidly. "No, that can't be right." He reached a hand toward the blanket. As he did, the boy's eyelids fluttered. A faint gasp stole out, the first breath in seconds. Patel and I exchanged stunned looks. Suddenly, the overhead lights dimmed and flickered. The boy's chest rose and fell, just a whisper of movement. I grabbed a bag valve mask. "Help me intubate." Patel leaned over, ready. As we worked, a soft giggle echoed from the far end of the bay, a child's laugh, echoing off concrete walls. We froze. The only other sounds were rain pounding on the metal canopy and our own frantic breathing. When we finished, the boy lay still but breathing, the monitor chirping a weak rhythm. I wrapped an IV line into his tiny arm. Patel wiped sweat from his forehead. "How? Why?" I stared at the pale sheet covering his body. We never had a call for a missing child. I stood, voice tight. "Check the registry. Was there a FEMA alert, anything?" He shook his head. "Nothing." We transferred him to a room in the critical care unit and bolted the door. Through the glass observation window, we watched the monitor settle into a steady beep. I turned to leave, flipping off the light switch. Only the hallway beyond remained illuminated. The room went black. I flicked the switch again. A child's silhouette stood by the bed, tiny fist pressed against the glass. He wore a soaked raincoat. His face gleamed pale in the glow of the monitor's alarm light. I yelped, heart lurching, but when I peered in, the room was empty. The monitor beeped steadily, but in the darkness, I heard that giggle again, low and mocking. I forced myself to walk up the hall to report it. As I passed the break room, I nearly collided with security guard Martinez. "You okay, nurse?" he asked, voice tight. "You're as white as a sheet." I forced a smile. "Just tired." He frowned. "Strange call tonight. They found another kid and a body, they think, out by the old pilgrimage trail." He handed me a slip, unidentified male, mid-30s, no ID. I blinked. "How many kids tonight?" He glanced at the paper. 2. My stomach sank. "Where's the other one?" "ICU, room 14. I turned on my heel. All at once, the fluorescent lights in the corridor buzzed and died. Emergency ballasts flickered on, bathing the hallway in a jaundiced glow. I sprinted toward critical care, stethoscope clinking, gown trailing. The nurses' stations were deserted, computers locked, chairs askew. A distant intercom crackled. 14, 14, 14. It repeated, growing louder, like an old record stuck on a skip. I charged into room 14. The boy lay curled in the blanket, breathing. But outside the window, another small shape stood, pressing its face to the glass. Only this one was a girl, pigtails dark as oil, eyes huge and hollow. She pressed her palms to the pane, and mud streaked her hands. I backed away. She smiled, revealing no tongue, only an empty cavern. "Leave us," she whispered, voice distant. My chest tightened. The boy moaned and sat up, craning his neck toward the window. I rushed to his side. "It's okay," I whispered as I brushed water from his hair. "It's just your sister." He blinked at me, confused, then reached toward the glass. "Sarah." It was the girl's voice, behind me. I turned slowly. Martinez stood in the doorway, but where his face should have been was nothing but darkness. The hallway light flickered as he advanced, skeletal limbs protruding from his uniform. He hissed, "She wants you to stay." I backpedaled, grabbing the boy. He clung to me as I bolted for the door. My hand hit the wall switch. It clicked off, then back on. The hallway that had stretched endlessly before me was now a dead end, the exit doors replaced by a brick wall. My heart slammed. I turned, and the girl stood inches from my face, water dripping from her hair onto my scrubs. "Stay," she breathed, voice a chorus of children. "Play." She reached out, tiny fingers curling around my wrist. Ice shot through my arm. I yanked free and fled into the darkened room, slamming the door. The boy whimpered, eyes bright with fear. I held him close. Through the glass, the girl slapped her palm against the window, spray of water and mud across the pane. I saw her reflection above us, looming, ghostly, the other shape too large to be human, melding behind her like a tidal wave of shadow. The monitor flatlined. The boy's form went limp. I screamed, smashing the glass with my elbow. Shards scattered across the floor. The girl staggered back, her face crumpling into something monstrous, an endless black maw, dripping water below. I seized the boy and bolted through the shattered window frame into the corridor. Sirens wailed suddenly, code blue blaring overhead. Nurses and doctors flooded past me, eyes blank, instruments gleaming like blades. They passed me by as though I were air. The corridor stretched into darkness, the ends swallowed in shadow. Somehow, I made it back to the ambulance bay. Rain had stopped. The gurney sat empty, wheels locked. I sank to my knees, clutching a soaked hospital blanket. No sign of the boy. No blood, no footprints, only my own tracks in the slick floor. The radio crackled to life. Medic 12 returning to station, ETA 5 minutes. The voice was calm. I stared at the radio. My fingers trembled as I keyed the mic. Medic 12, this is ER Nurse Lai. Where's the patient? Silence. Then the reply, who? In the pale light of dawn, I found the pediatric unit empty. No equipment, no staff, nothing. The wing was abandoned years ago, left to rot until we reopened it last month. I checked the records. There was no room 14. No missing child tonight. No unidentified male. No call for a silent code. But in my pocket was a small photo, wet and creased. 2 children on a gurney, eyes closed as if asleep. The googly-eyed sticker sheet one of them held. Best sick day ever. On the back, written in a familiar scrawl, thanks for playing. I tossed the photo into the medication dispenser. It vanished behind the steel door. When I looked away and back again, the slot was empty, but I heard a soft giggle echoing down the empty hall. I quit before sunrise. I still work in hospitals, but I'll never set foot in that wing again. At night, I lie awake, dreading the echo of little feet padding down the corridor, the whisper of a child's voice calling my name, the knowledge that somewhere between life and death, I might still be on the other side of that glass, waiting for someone to play with me.